I did every sport, so that's why, no one can actually bully on sports, because I know to be when things are leaderless. I was often the person that put everything in the right direction. You know what you did wrong, Ja'afar? I said, no, sir. Well, that was it. You never went through the pain barrier. And I've always remembered the pain barrier.
Today, we're sitting down with a man whose life bridges royalty, business, and the transformation of Malaysian sport. Yang Amat Mulia Tunku Imran Ibni Almarhum Tuanku Ja'afar, grandson of Malaysia's first king, son of the 10th, and a figure who has shaped Malaysia's sporting landscape across 5 decades. From his early days as a multi-sport athlete to leading the Olympic Council of Malaysia for 20 years, Tunku Imran's vision has created lasting legacies. SUKMA, SportExcel, and the successful hosting of the 1998 Commonwealth Games that put Malaysia on the global sporting map. As president of the World Squash Federation, the Commonwealth Games Federation, and a member of the International Olympic Committee, Tunku Imran proudly hoisted the Jalur Gemilang on the world stage. But beyond the titles and achievements lies a story of passion, innovation, and collective leadership. Today, we'll explore the journey of a sporting prince who became an architect of Malaysian sporting excellence, the highs, the lows, and the lessons learned along the way. This is Julang, and I'm honored to welcome Tunku Imran. Tunku, thank you for joining us on Julang.
Yes, it's my pleasure.
You occupy a very unique space. Royalty, successful businessman, and a towering figure in Malaysian and world sport. What we want to delve into today is that incredible journey. So let's start at the beginning. Growing up as the grandson of Malaysia's first king and the son of the 10th, what are your earliest memories?
Well, I'll tell you the start. The start was a Sunday afternoon on the 21st of March, 1948, when I was born. And I did ask my mother, actually, how come she remembers it was a Sunday afternoon? And she said, you're the only child where your father was not present at. I said, what was he doing? He said he was playing cricket. So the joke has always been that I was always destined to be a cricketer.
Definitely. What's something about your early upbringing that I would have to understand to know Tunku Imran?
Okay. Firstly, I think, my father was, not necessarily just an ordinary member of the royal family. He was in a Malay college, in the Malay college. Then he had to break off because of the war, went for a while to Raffles in Singapore, and then went to Nottingham University. And then by which time, he already had three children. And then one was born while he was in Nottingham. So he was very much family man, and he wanted to be a civil servant, not necessarily one of the members of the royal family that were not doing nothing or not very much. So he was very much wanted to be part of the new post-war Malaya then.
And how did that shape you as an individual?
Well, it shaped me in the sense that I think I did grow up being, not cocooned in a palace, and a very, very early experience as a toddler in the United Kingdom at Nottingham, at Nottingham and at Oxford.
Yeah.
Coming back and being the little son of a assistant district officer in Perak, assistant state secretary, the DO of Kinta in Ipoh, and then a DO in Tampin. So it was, it was not the normal royal experience, yet we also had all the opportunity to be at royal events and very close to my grandfather, because my grandfather was then the young Tuan Besar of Negeri Sembilan, and of course in 1957 became the first Agung.
That's right.
But
In spite of that.
in spite of that, but I think the real eye-opener for me and sport and everything else was in 1956, my father decided that he would like to join the Malayan Foreign Service. So he had to do a one-year course before independence in 1957 in London at the Foreign Office or the Commonwealth Office. We did a year in London, and then that's when he decided to send my brother and I to boarding school. And that was, to me, the start of my really interest in sport.
Right. Was there a sense of destiny or expectation placed on you in spite of the relatively regular upbringing, particularly regarding service?
In a way, there was. I've always believed that I wanted to follow my father, even when I was at school. So I was very keen to join the Malayan Foreign Service or, something similar, in government, really. But of course, it didn't quite happen that way.
As you were saying, you were sent to boarding school in England, King's Canterbury.
Yes,
quite young. Right. How did that experience of being away from home at that age shape you as an individual today?
Well, home was where your parents are. So my parents at the time was living in London. So home was not very far away. It wasn't Malaya or halfway around the world. But then, of course, later it did become. But after that, we'd already got used to being at boarding school. And I think one of the good things that happened, or probably I think a great thing that happened, was that we were sent together. So I had an elder brother who, always, looked after me. And I looked after any way I could after him. And we were pretty inseparable, although we had totally different interests.
Tell us about the role that sport played at King's Canterbury. Was it just for fun, or did you sense?
Oh no, it was compulsory.
Of course.
Yes, I think everyone who's been to an English boarding knows that every term, the way we were structured, every term you had a major sport, but you can take on minor sports as you wished, or as your housemaster wished often. So in the winter term, it was rugby. In the Easter term, it was more like, you could do cross country, or you could do sevens, or you could do hockey. I did hockey. And then in the summer, you could do athletics or cricket. But you could always play the minor sports, which I did. In the winter, I took up squash. And in the summer, I would play tennis. So I was, and then sometimes, roped in to play basketball for the house, in an inter-house. So I did every sport, so that's why, no one can actually bully on sports, because I know what they're talking about, a lot of them.
Any particular sporting moments from that time that really stands out, that you recall back to often? A memorable match, or maybe a tough lesson that you learned on the field?
Well, let me say that I always remember at squash, once after losing in a long game, the squash master said to me, you know what you did wrong, Ja'afar, because they called it Ja'afar by surname. And I said, no, sir, I just lost, I got tired. Well, that was it. You never went through the pain barrier. And I've always remembered that, the pain barrier. So, it's one of my things that when I, really got tired after that in any sport, then you feel that you cannot go on anymore. Somehow you force yourself through that pain barrier, that second wind comes or whatever, and it didn't matter. You still managed to get to the end.
Your schoolmate, David Gower, went on to captain England at cricket.
Yeah, can I just say that he wasn't a mate in the sense that he was there at a different time.
Sure.
I mean, he's a good 10 years after me.
Right.
So I never actually played cricket with him, but of course I've met him since. But we had a very good tradition of cricket already anyway. And when he was there, he's just one of the guys that blossomed and really became super good.
Later, you pursued law at Nottingham and Gray's Inn. Why law amidst this budding passion for sport? And how did you juggle the demands of university life and the play?
I think there's another funny story about me and law at Nottingham was the fact that I actually did my A-levels were languages.
Right.
I did English, French, and German.
Wow.
So, and my mother was horrified when I chose those 3 subjects. She told me, "What are you going to do, Pete? You're going to be a tourist guide or a lecturer or something?" I said, "Mama, don't worry, I'll find a good university to do something at university." So when it came to choosing, what I did at university, I chose law because one, my father had done law, and my grandfather had done law, and then the second one was that it was a subject that everyone started on an even footing. So no one could sort of take a step ahead of you.
We hear your close friends call you Pete. Can you share the story of why that is?
Pete has always been Pete, right from the beginning. Our family always had nicknames for themselves. And I'm not talking about immediate family. I am talking about cousins and, all of us. And I was named Pete by my grandfather, the first Agung, to Tunku Abdul Rahman. He just told my mum and dad, "I'd like
Pete.
This one to be called Pete."
And that was it?
And that was it.
Now, you've described yourself as an innovator, a leader, even linking it to your birth signs. Has that drive to be first always been a core part of who you are?
Not really. No. I was always want to be part of the team. And if I landed, at the top of the pile, then yeah. But I always felt that teamwork was what everything was all about. And having at school, you really was drummed into the team sports that you all played.
Yeah.
And so, it was just something that I just happened to be when things are leaderless, when no one really knows what to do. I was often the person that put everything into the right direction or a direction. It may not necessarily have been right, but a direction, and try and sort of just organize things. I think the big eye opener for me in terms of organization, and particularly sports organization, was at Nottingham. And there, none of the teaching staff or the university staff got involved. The whole, team was organized by the students themselves.
Right.
And so I was, very much part of the squash team. I was in the first team for 3 years. So it was, it was interesting, so interesting that we organized everything from who was going to drive, who wasn't drinking, who was, how many cars do we need to go. And then we were involved in the East Midlands Squash League. We were involved in the university, UAU, the University Athletics Union, which is all universities in the UK, in which we were semi-finalists at cricket and at squash, I think, when I was there. I landed up in my final year as the secretary of the squash. And I realized that what the previous secretary had done was he'd given me everything on a plate, even before the term started. All the matches had all been organized, the league matches and all the home and aways, the friendlies, our entry into UAU. So I had really just to make sure that it worked. And that's what I did to my successor. So later on, when I came back to Malaysia and got involved in sports associations, I remember that you don't rely on outside parties to help you. Just do it yourself. Raise your own money, raise your own transportation, fix the matches, make everyone happy.
Between squash and cricket at this point, which was your first love?
I think, probably cricket. Yeah, it's a team sport, and it was a huge sort of dimension to cricket, but the squash was also fun, smaller group, more an individual sport. But when you were, part of a team, it becomes very much supporting one another. So I think cricket I enjoyed, and rugby, by the way, I did enjoy a lot.
Now, returning home and building a career back in 1971, was it?
Yeah.
When you came back.
I had been called to the bar. I spent 1 year in London, where actually I learned also, I did a lot of sport. I stayed in a place called London House, which was for postgraduate students from the Commonwealth. And I was there with a bunch of New Zealanders, Australians, South Africans, Canadians, and it was all huge fun. And we played everything there. Played rugby, hockey, cricket, tennis, squash, and they had squash courts in the hostel, the hall, and they also had tennis courts in the garden,
right,
in front of in the square, and they just borrowed fields. Again, what I learned again was you didn't have to have your own field. You just borrowed fields or you rented them, and virtually all our matches were like essentially away matches.
Yeah.
Because we were playing someone who people were looking for opposition. So we were very competitive. We went on tours to Ireland and to other places, France.
How do you manage the energy to focus on both worlds?
I think it's just a question of the time management. I think it's a question of that I did do a law. I think law is I shouldn't really be giving people, young students, shortcuts to passing exams, but you could get a whole sort of 30, 40 page case to read, but if you knew where the relevant bits are and what really they're looking for, you can go immediately, the fast reading, you go immediately to the end. And I learned that at university through one or two of my close friends in the law department, yeah.
Now, back in Malaysia, cricket was a passion that followed you from your UK days. So you represented Malaysia.
I actually didn't represent Malaysia in an international. I went on tour with a Malaysian team to Hong Kong, but I wasn't selected for the actual match.
Right.
So therefore, I'm not technically a cricket international, but I did get I played the same people, the same matches, and against the same type of opposition. And I captained my father's team because he's a young Putan Besar. My late father was also the patron of Malaysian cricket. So in those days, we had a lot of visiting cricket teams. And so, I was normally put there as captain of his team. So I became a captain at a very, very young age.
You were captain at Selangor Club as well?
I was elected captain, also quite young, even actually before I became a full member. Which was pointed out to me very sarcastically by the then president, very famous person called Tan Sri Taib Anda, who's the Malayan banking chairman and the former chairman of Felda. And he said to me one day in the club, he says, Pete, he said, you make history in this club. I said, how do I make history in the club, Tan Sri? And he said, well, you're the only sports member who's been made a captain of a major sport in this club. I twigged, and then I joined as a full member. That was 5 years later, because every time I got to the age when I should be joining, they put up the age. So in the end, I joined in 1976 in the club. I'd been there for 6 years already.
Sticking to cricket, you batted with the legendary Sir Gary Sobers.
Yes.
In 1984.
Yes.
What was that like?
That was fun. He was already past, he was no longer playing Test at all. I think he was pushing 60. I was also in 1984, beginning to, not play so often. And it was the centenary match of the Royal Selangor Club, which was 1984. And so they asked my, patron of Malaysian cricket to put up a team. And somehow we managed to get Gary Sobers and Farouk Engineer to play for us. And I was captain. So again, captaining Gary Sobers was not bad. And then we really had a wonderful time. We lost the match, but we both put on 50 for the third wicket, and he went on to get his half century. We played golf, the next day. It was really a great experience. Golf was funny because I got to the golf course, and I said, "Look, Gary, I can't find left-handed clubs for you." And they said, right-handed, it'll be fine. So we got to the tee box. I said, by the way, what's your handicap? He says, well, it depends. Left, I'm 4 handicap. If it's right, I'm 10. That's the sort of person he was, a wonderful character, laid back. In those days, they didn't make money.
Yeah.
At all. I mean, he was used to travel everywhere by courtesy of the Barbados Tourist Association, because he happened to be there like the ambassador.
You mentioned him as a role model.
Yeah.
What qualities did you?
Well, I just found him. One, he was always calm about everything. So he calmed everyone down when I was watching him. And he was just unbelievable at what he did. If you're batting, at bowling, he can bowl fast. He can bowl spin, googlies, brilliant fielder, whether it's, in the covers or in the gully or in the short leg, whatever it was, close by to the bat. I mean, he just a wonderful, wonderful example of, I think, different now, because, now everyone's professional. But I think it probably the best example of what amateur sport was all about. And then these are the days of the Rod Lavers and the, this cricket, the Gary Sobers, and the when people didn't play for money, they just played because they love the game and for their country.
They say you should never meet your heroes, let alone captain them.
When I was in the Selangor Club, I had 2 Malaysian captains under me.
Wow.
Yes, Professor Alex Delican, and whose claim to fame, main claim to fame, was he got Gary Sobers out first ball when Gary Sobers visited in 1960 or 1962, and Gary was at his peak. And Jagdev Singh, Dr. Jagdev Singh, both doctors.
let's talk squash.
Yeah.
You formed SRAM in 1972.
Well, let's put it, I didn't form it. What happened was, squash is a very small game. Played in a few clubs around KL, and well, 2 clubs in KL really, and 1 or 2 sort of private organizations, other organizations, and Perak, Ipoh, and Penang. But my father had played squash. Funnily enough, my father was probably the first recorded champion of squash in Malaysia, because at the time, 1938, the Malay College opened its new squash courts, and my father became the first champion with Tun Razak, Razak, his great friend, the later Prime Minister, runner-up.
Wow.
So we had a few, and we had this one organization, one cup annual trophy called the Tiger Trophy. So all these clubs and teams were in KL at the time, at the Lake Club. And I happened to be the convener of the Lake Club. So I got everyone together, after the match and said, okay, let's form a national association
For squash, yeah.
So, we invited Hisham al-Bakri, that's Hisham al-Bakri, a famous architect at the time, another Malay College old boy, to be the president, and we filled up all the. And then, here I am conducting the meeting, saying, okay, this is, and when everyone agree. Then the position of secretary, and I said to myself, oh my God, I'm going to be, missed out on this. I'm going to miss out on this. And then someone said, I think it should be Pete. Should be the secretary. So everyone agreed, and so I became the first secretary. So I didn't form it. I did a lot of the admin in order that once that meeting was ready to actually form it, to get the consent, registrar of societies organized and everything else. And so from then on, squash grew. That was in 1972. And then we decided that we wanted a national championships the next year in 1973. And then from then on, it went on. We decided as a policy, every year we added a new event, national event or international event. So we had this 1973 was the national, and then we added Malaysian Open, and then the Malaysian Close, and the Malaysian Junior, and then the Malaysian Inter Team, and so it grew.
Who was the first national squash champion in 1973?
I was, and I'm very proud of that, because it was firstly the president of the Lake Club was Tun Razak, who was my father's best friend, and he gave away the trophy. Secondly, I was only 5th seed. There were 4 people who were ahead of me in the seeding anyway, in the ranking, and I won from that. And it was tougher actually than even today's championships, because today they only play probably 1 match a day. Then you used to play 2 matches a day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, evening. So it was a tough tournament.
When you got that table together at Lake Club to form this association, what was the gap that you saw that needed filling? Because you had the multiple associations anyway, and they were running games.
Well, we in order for the game of squash to grow, is that we needed courts. We had 23 courts in the whole of Malaysia, spread out. 50% of them were in clubs, and the other 50% were in some military, post somewhere, or one was a converted. One of the guys was in telecoms, was so keen, British guy, was so keen on squash that he converted a storeroom into a squash court. So, there were a lot of enthusiasts everywhere. And so we had to grow we had to do parallel growth, really. One, the facilities needed to be built, and the other one, we had to encourage people to play. So I can tell you that by 1978, about 5 years later, we had over 700 courts. That was the growth.
Wow.
And a lot of the courts, private sector, malls had courts.
Yeah.
Hotels had courts.
Yeah.
And people, had set up, I even myself and an architect friend, we set up our own squash complex.
What was your vision as part of SRAM for developing the sport in Malaysia at the time in the 80s?
Well, I just wanted to be, up there amongst the big boys, that we were, it was like we'd become a major sport, or it was a sport that was popular amongst, and you can get it anywhere and everywhere, which happened. I think I can't see any other, I still don't know any other sport in Malaysia that had as many as 94 teams playing in the league. And that's what we had in the Kuala Lumpur area squash league. At its height, 94 teams. And the only people running it was myself, then president, and the secretary, Prasad Pillai. And it was simple. We had 5 divisions. Mondays, Division 5, Tuesday, Division 4. So therefore, Friday, Division 1. They didn't have to be a club. They had to just name a team. So some called them Harimau team or Antar team. Our company had 2 teams. And I even had a built squash court in my house. So keen was everyone in squash. And 94 teams. And everyone, and the first name team captain had to be responsible for booking the courts, telling the other side where to go, getting the result in. Then it went the other way.
Yeah.
So we had it was just run by, and they had to get their results in by the next day. The only thing they had then was fax. None of this telephone stuff, messaging, so, but amazing, it ran like clockwork. So I know the only sponsor we had was 7-Up, and that was 8,000 ringgit or something for everyone at the end, and that was it. 94 teams, which lasted almost half a year.
Parallel to that, in 1986, SUKMA, the Malaysian Games.
That was another bright idea of mine. I thought it was a bright idea. So, I because of cricket and other things and business, I traveled a lot. And so I just saw, my Canadian friend told me that, hey, in Canada, they have a Canada Games amongst all the provinces. I said, that's interesting. So, I thought about it. Wow, that would be quite good for Malaysia. And I just come on to board in 1986 as the vice president of OCM, by the way. And so I said, okay, let's see who, can help on this one. So I went to Sulaiman Daud, then the Minister of Sport, Youth and Sport. And I went to him with the idea, okay, we have Sukan Malaysia Games, where everyone, every state has a team. And the objective being that the host team, the host state, will build the facilities. So we encourage the building of facilities, and we encouraged for all the states to train, identify and train the sports persons. So he said, what a good idea. You're going to be the first chairman of the organization. So I landed up for the first 2 SUKMAs as a chairman. And it grew. It grew. But then after a while, the politicians took over. It grew. The budget, the cost of the first games, which was in KL, and the second games was in KL as well.
Yeah.
First game was only 700,000 ringgit. Now, but it was Sarawak. When Sarawak took over, then it just moved into a sort of an Olympic Games mode, and you had super opening ceremonies and everything. But it still works, I think, in the sense that every state, but when it's their turn, really does put in a big effort. There's been 1 or 2 white elephants, unfortunately, which I don't think is SUKMA's fault. It's a state's fault.
Yeah.
As I understand it, that the swimming pool that was built in Alustar by Cradle, was not very well utilized, and in the end, it's not utilized at all. So that's very sad.
Well, what impact did you hope it would have at the time that you were forming SUKMA Games in the first 2 years?
Well, I just felt there's more activity in sport, more interest from states outside of the center. One trying to get the state associations to then also assist and work together with the state governments to really put this all together. And it's worked. I just mentioned Sarawak. I think it's just, sport in Sarawak is just going, really well. They are building and they're, in many of the sports, like diving, I think the junior development programs are tremendous.
Yep. Speaking of junior development programs, SportExcel in 1991. What is SportExcel?
SportExcel is a foundation for sporting excellence, which Yayasan Perkembangan Sukan Malaysia, which I founded in 1991, I think.
Yeah.
Again, being in Olympic Council of Malaysia, my eyes were sort of more open to what was happening in national sport, and meeting Ministry of Education people and Ministry of Health and everything else, and that I saw that Ministry of Education was just not really doing much for sport. And they said, no, we do a lot for sport. We support about 35 sports. And I said, what do you do for them? Well, every year we run a carnival. And I thought to myself, well, how can a top athlete, young athlete, play against his peers once a year and improve? So that's when I really realized that what we need to do is have an organization which assists national associations to put together regular competition amongst the best of the best in the country, so that they can get better. And today it's grown. Most of the 10 sports are still with us. Some dropped out. Some new ones have come on. We went for the under-supported, under-financed, sports, rather than the badmintons and the footballs. And I think we made a difference, to bowling, to squash, to now track cycling. And I think that it's, and we brought in the international element as well. So I think it's been really going well, and and I think continues to go well. Golf particularly is going well.
So seeing athletes like Nicole David, Ong Beng Hee emerge from the system, how did that make you feel, seeing the success of it?
Very satisfying. And we try and keep in touch with them. Nicole has put back so much into the sport and to sport generally with her Nicole David organization, of which I'm a director. She made me a director. And it's going great guns. I mean, I don't know whether you know about NDO or Nicole David organization, but, she's based out in the Bukit Jalil Golf Club, where there are 3 squash courts.
Right.
But she does to primary school children, mainly B40, a mix of sport, which is essentially squash, and education, and even giving some insight and education to the mothers and the parents. Great job.
Your first major international leadership role, I guess, for Malaysia was chef de mission at the 1988 Seoul Olympics.
Well, for Malaysia, yes.
Yeah.
That's exactly, yes. But I was already involved very much in the international...
IOC.
No, not IOC yet. International sport, in the sense that I was already a vice president of the World Squash Federation, because, we'd move Malaysian squash so well that we are recognized internationally, and I became the vice president. I stood for vice president and won it. And then in '89, I stood for president and won it and became president. So, I in a way, I'd put Malaysia on the map in squash and into the world leadership. But yes, it was 88. Seoul was a big eye opener for me, being the chef de mission.
What were the biggest challenges or lessons that you learned from that experience?
Well, I learned from that experience there's nothing, we're not going to, get anywhere in sport, particularly at that Olympic level, unless we, really get the experts in and, there is one level above that to achieve. You can become the super amateur, which I was involved with, as I think. But then that's next level, and you realize that the athletes and everyone had to be really, not just one manager, but a whole team of them, with psychologists and everything.
Nutritionists.
Yes,
sports
yes.
doctors.
And so, it was a whole team behind it. And whether, Malaysia, would ever get there in that area was something which I think that's one of the big things I learned. And then I learned that, it's a huge movement. And, we were talking about 198 countries. I mean, you weren't talking SEA Games, 11 countries. You thought, in those days, Malaysia thought, that was already big.
Yeah.
But there's 198, and you just, met everyone, and then you just saw that organizing it was not going to be easy. But the Koreans were the first time in 88 that they did the model, which we followed later at Commonwealth Games, of having apartment blocks, pre-selling them, and during the games they became the Games Village.
Yeah.
And then after the games, all cleaned up and handed over to the owners.
You then took the step up to become the president of the World Squash Federation in
89.
1989. What was that step up like?
I don't think it was too far of a step from being the vice president.
Yeah.
Squash internationally was a very small sport, very much Commonwealth, based. I just saw, myself coming in as president and a great team, by the way, of people, that we needed to get this whole place in a world of squash organized. So I basically introduced a new constitution for the squash. We had continental associations. We made everyone who had even one squash court wanted to be a member, could become a member, get a vote. So we became very democratic. I think one of the early sport that actually gave everyone a vote rather than have associate member and everything else. Everyone became a member, but if you were a founder member, you had 5 votes. If you had a minimum number of courts, say 100 courts, you would be up to an extra vote, and then it all became, the courts determine the number of votes you had. Right. So I think in the end that was a very fair system for the time, and squash grew international. Not only had squash grown in the country, but squash grew internationally, mm-hmm. And to me, that I saw that as part of my legacy, I suppose, in world squash, that established the template for the growth, and of course, just starting that Olympic bid of ours.
Yeah.
Yes, we decided that we really needed to go and get squash into the Olympics in the multi-sports games. If not, we're not going to be recognized. Unfortunately,
you were told that the bus was full when you made that bid for the squash.
That was Samaranch, yes. Juan Antonio Samaranch told me, and the president, he says, we love squash. I know we all know about squash, but just imagine, you're waiting for the bus arrives, you try and get on, but the bus is full, you cannot get on. And he said, that is a situation for squash. You might be at the front of the queue, but sorry, the bus is full.
That must have been a disappointment for you as a president.
It was disappointment, but do you realize that we've had 3 opportunities to be in the Olympics? The first one was in '95 in a meeting in Singapore, where IOC wanted one more sport. I can't remember which sport has dropped out. The squash got the 51% of the vote, but the rules then was that it was 2/3.
You need 66
of the vote, so we didn't get it, and so it went on. The next time round, we were again in the short list. We were pipped by golf and rugby for obvious reasons. Rugby is a huge sport already, and the sevens Malaysian had made it into such a huge sport, Malaysian Commonwealth Games.
Yeah.
And, golf was already a big TV sport. And of course, revenue does matter to big organizations like the IOC. So we missed it there. Then they dropped wrestling, and then squash was back in there. And then the wrestling came back strong because, there was so much political support from Putin.
Yeah.
from all the
USSR.
yeah, and all India and everyone. I mean, they're big wrestling nations.
Yeah.
And so squash missed out again. And now, but we're going to be in LA
28. Finally.
finally.
What did you take away from those setbacks every time you were faced with the opportunity to bring squash?
Yes, there was a lot of political influence involved, and for me, that was not my
Foray.
I just didn't like being involved, politically. I don't like politics anyway. And so, to lobby like a politician or to offer quid pro quos and all these sort of things, I said, we just need to just get in on our own merits.
One merit, yeah.
Yeah. And I've always believed that. That's the only thing that went wrong.
The fireworks went
The fireworks went off. And probably the crucial supporter to make it successful was the Prime Minister. I didn't find any pressure. We were 14 million short. To me, we were cheated of 14 million, 98 games, which is very successful, which put the Commonwealth Games on the map. From a boring 10 sport games to a really interesting 16 sport games, which reflect what the Commonwealth is best at.
Sertai perbualan dalam komen section di bawah dan mari teruskan perbincangan. Terima kasih kerana menyertai kami dalam perjalanan ini ke dunia sukan Malaysia. Julang adalah pilihan anda untuk berita dan perbincangan sukan dan hiburan. Di sini, anda akan menemui berita terkini, analisis mendalam, pandangan pakar dan cerita yang penting kepada rakyat Malaysia. Jika anda suka video ini, tekan butang like, subscribe untuk konten yang eksklusif dan aktifkan notifications supaya anda tidak terlepas video kami yang seterusnya. Kita jumpa di sana.